A man was married to his wife for 52 years. The last 4 years, he had been caring for her at home after her stroke. She never had a bed sore, never missed a meal, and never spent hours lying in her own waste. Physically, though, he just couldn't care for her anymore. So he visited a local nursing home, and they told him they would care for his wife as if she were a member of their own family. And he believed them. 1 month later, she had a stage 4 bed sore. It got infected, it went septic, and she died. If you have a loved one in a nursing home who is at risk for bed sores or who has a bed sore, you need to sit down and watch this video, and you need to watch all of it. Why is that? Because I believe that your loved one is at serious risk. Because in my opinion, most bed sores that develop in nursing homes are preventable, and the people who die from them often die unnecessarily. Now, today I'm going to explain how bed sores actually start, and I'm going to do that in plain English, no medical mumbo jumbo. And then second, I'm going to tell you the real reasons bed sores happen to nursing home residents. And FYI, it's not what the nursing home industry wants you to believe. And third, I'm going to show you exactly when a bed sore crosses the line and goes into a potential lawsuit territory. And at the end, I'll give you a simple checklist for what you are to do next if you see a bed sore on your loved one. I'm David Terry. I'm an attorney based in St. Louis, and for the last 25 years, our law firm has handled nursing home abuse and neglect cases throughout Missouri and Illinois. And in doing so, I've seen hundreds of bed sore cases. And I can tell you this, from what I've seen, the vast majority of them were preventable. So let's jump right in. Bed sores, which are also called pressure ulcers or pressure injuries, or the medical term is decubitus ulcers. Bed sores happen when the same spot on the body stays under pressure for too long. That pressure inhibits the blood flow to that part of the body. And no blood flow means no oxygen. And no oxygen means the tissue starts to die. And this is why bed sores show up in predictable places. They typically appear on the resident's heels, tailbone area, the hips and the shoulders, and even the back of the resident's head. Early on, a bed sore can look really small. You might see a red spot or a darker patch of skin. The skin might feel warm, or the resident might experience some tenderness in that area or some swelling in that area. That is a stage 1 bed sore. Now that spot can then blister, and it can open up and form a little shallow crater. This is a stage 2 bed sore. Now look, stage 1 and stage 2 bed sores can start quickly, but they can also be healed quickly if the nursing home finds them and initiates treatment and prevention measures. But if they don't, the bed sore is likely to worsen to a stage 3 bed sore. This is when the bed sore begins to tunnel through the layers of fatty tissue and then deeper through the muscle. Now it becomes much more difficult to treat and much more difficult to reverse. And if left untreated, a bed sore can actually get deep enough that when it reaches stage 4, which is the worst it can get, you can actually see the resident's bone. Now keep in mind, bed sores can start a lot faster than most families realize. Medical sources state that bed sores can develop in as little as 2 or 3 hours if there is sustained, unrelieved pressure on that part of the body. That is why it is so important that a nursing home stay on top of this for residents who are at risk. Now look, here's where things get really dangerous. Listen closely here, because one of the real dangers of bed sores, particularly in the later stages, is infection. If a bed sore gets infected, that infection can not only cause significant pain, but it can also spread into the bloodstream. And that's when family hear words like sepsis or septic shock. So if the nursing home where your loved one lives acts casual about prevention and treatment of bed sores, or they tell you bed sores are just kind of part of aging, that should set off alarms for you. And you should consider whether you want your loved one at that facility. Now let's talk about why bed sores really happen in nursing homes. You'll hear nursing homes make a lot of excuses when a facility develops a bed sore. Oh, they're old, those things happen, they're sick, their skin is just so fragile. And yeah, sure, those things can increase the risk, but risk is exactly why the facility is supposed to have a plan and to follow that plan. Now, you know the line, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, in nursing homes, the greater the resident's risk, the greater the facility's responsibility to prevent harm. The first nursing home case I had 25 years ago was a bedsore case. And since then, I've handled more bedsore cases than I can remember. But here's what I've learned in the past 25 years of handling nursing home cases in Missouri and Illinois and elsewhere around the country. Most bedsores are preventable, and the failure to prevent them comes from three basic failures by the nursing home. Failure number one is not enough staff. To understand the importance of staffing when it comes to the prevention and treatment of bedsores, you really need to understand three key regulatory rules for Missouri nursing homes. First, there's a federal rule. This applies to every state. Federal rule that states the facility must have sufficient nursing staff with the appropriate competencies and skill sets to provide nursing and related services to assure resident safety and attain or maintain the highest practicable physical, mental, and psychosocial well-being of each resident. That's 42 CFR 483.35. Second, and this is particular to Missouri, there are two key state rules. The first states all facilities shall employ nursing personnel in sufficient numbers and with sufficient qualifications to provide nursing and related services which enable each resident to attain or maintain the highest practicable level of physical, mental, and psychosocial well-being. That's pretty similar to that federal rule. But the second Missouri regulatory rule is a little different, and it's kind of specific to Missouri. This regulatory rule states residents who are physically or mentally incapable, or both, of changing their own positions shall have their positions changed at least every 2 hours and shall be provided support devices to maintain good body alignment. Did you get that? Nursing homes are required to have enough staff members to assure resident safety to attain or maintain the highest practicable physical well-being. And in Missouri, specific to Missouri, Missouri residents who are deemed to be at risk for developing bedsores shall have their positions changed at least every 2 hours. Now, for those of you who have had family members in a nursing home, let me know in the comments if you believe this standard was reached in your loved one's facility. Tell us your story in the comments. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say. Now, the current model that most nursing homes that I'm familiar with operate under is the let's just get by model, because that's more profitable for ownership. The model of actually meeting each individual resident's needs, which is required by these rules, requires more staff. It requires more training, and that requires more money, which means that's less money in the owner's bank account. So when that is the case, what happens to the residents? Fewer aides on a shift means residents don't get repositioned on time. Those residents, well, they lay in their position longer than they're supposed to. And as a result, pressure on those vulnerable areas builds up until the skin starts to break down. Fewer aides also means that residents don't get cleaned in a timely manner. Incontinent residents sometimes lay in their own urine and feces for hours before someone cleans them up. I tell that to people all the time and they just don't believe me, but it's true. Now, the moisture from urine softens and weakens the skin, which accelerates the skin breakdown. And feces not only contributes also by softening and weakening the skin, but when there's an open bedsore, feces gets into that wound and it introduces bacteria, which causes infection, which can then cause sepsis, which can then cause death. It's all preventable. Now, I've worked with families all over Missouri and Illinois where the aides might have been kind people, but they were stretched so thin that they just couldn't possibly do everything that the residents needed. The family kept hearing the same message over and over again. We're doing our best. We're short-staffed. Unfortunately, when a nursing home is short-staffed, two of the easiest things to delay are repositioning and cleaning the residents. Now, here's what really frustrates me. These facilities know they're short-staffed. The corporate office knows that they're short-staffed. The administration knows, and the owners know, but they choose to operate that way because it's cheaper. And it's residents that pay the price. They pay the price with their skin, their health, and sometimes with their lives. And family members, they often pay the price of their loved one's life as well. But staffing isn't the only problem. Even a facility that has enough bodies in the building, those people have to know what they're looking for. They need to know what they're doing. And that's where failure number 2 comes in. Failure number 2, a lack of training and missed early signs. Even when there's enough people physically in the building, employees still need to know what they're supposed to be looking for. A trained giver should know the early warning signs of skin breakdown and escalate that quickly. Because once that skin breaks, the whole situation changes. Now you're dealing with wound care, not just wound prevention. Now you're dealing with wound care, a risk of infection, hospitalization, sometimes surgery, and the real risk of death. And if the records show the warning signs were there and nobody acted, in my book, that's negligence. I've seen cases where the red area was documented for days on end, reddened area noted, but nobody did anything about it. There was no notification to the doctor, no care plan update, no increased monitoring, no initiation of a repositioning schedule or making sure that the repositioning schedule was actually being done. Just that same vague note day after day, and then the skin broke open. I've also seen cases where a resident clearly has an open wound, but it's almost impossible to find any notification in the chart where the resident was being repositioned. That is a failure of training. That is a failure of supervision, and that is a systemic failure at the nursing home, and it causes real harm. And even when the staff is there and they're trained, there's still one more place where the nursing homes routinely drop the ball, and it's the one, in my opinion, that makes the strongest legal case. Failure number 3, ignoring the care plan. Every resident should have an individualized care plan that reflects their needs. If a resident can't reposition themselves, the care plan should address turning, repositioning, skin checks, nutrition, hydration, pressure relieving surfaces, and wound monitoring. And here's where Missouri gives us something specific. You remember that Missouri regulation? Residents who are physically or mentally incapable or both of changing their own positions shall have their positions changed at least every 2 hours. Remember that? Every 2 hours. That is not a suggestion. That is a requirement in Missouri. So the care plan should reflect that. Now, I've seen a million care plans, and I've seen care plans that say reposition the resident frequently. Now look, nursing homes are masters at ambiguity. They do that so they can wiggle out of bad facts. There are other states that don't have the 2-hour language in their regulatory rules, so perhaps frequently works there. But even there, they have to be able to define what frequently means. And in cases I've handled in various states around the country, nursing home employees either are unable to define frequently, which is a huge red flag, by the way, or they will say frequently in our nursing home means every 2 hours. Regardless, if the care plan says turn every 2 hours, but the charting shows long gaps, or worse, shows no documentation of turning, that is a monumental failure on part of the nursing home, and it's a predictable failure. Now, here's one of the saddest realities I can tell you. In 25 years of handling nursing home cases around the country, specifically in Missouri and Illinois, I have never, not once, not a single time, seen a nursing home chart where they can actually prove through documentation that they repositioned a resident every 2 hours around the clock. Never. Not a single time. So those are the 3 failures that I see time and time again. Now I know what some of you are thinking. All 3 of these things have happened to me. Does that mean that I have a legal case? Well, let me walk you through how I think about that. Not every bedsore is automatically a lawsuit. When families call my office, I usually walk them through these 3 questions. Question 1. Was the bedsore preventable? And I think this is the heart of the case. Federal rules say that the facility must prevent pressure ulcers unless the resident's clinical condition makes them unavoidable. So we look at the resident's condition and we look at the facility's actions. Was the resident high risk? What was the turning schedule? Were skin checks documented? Was there a pressure relieving mattress on the bed? Was nutrition addressed? Were staff following the care plan consistently? Was there a turning schedule that was actually documented? If the nursing home can't show the basic prevention steps or these notes have gaps, well, that's a red flag. Now, if I'm looking at a chart and I see hardly any charting about repositioning a resident and that resident develops an infected stage 3 or stage 4 bedsore on their sacrum, I don't need to be a doctor to know what happened. They weren't repositioned every 2 hours and they weren't cleaned regularly. Period. But let me take a step back here and address the question of unavoidability because that's a critical issue. I've stated that I believe most bedsores that I've seen were preventable, and I believe that is true. However, I do believe some bedsores are extremely difficult to prevent and they may be unavoidable. Bedsores that develop on the heels of the foot can be very difficult to prevent when the resident has certain health factors like diabetes or peripheral vascular disease, or peripheral arterial disease. Diseases that restrict the blood flow to the extremities make it really difficult to prevent wounds from developing in that area. Now, while I have no doubt that the care was probably less than sufficient, it's hard to prove that there was negligence that caused those wounds, because those wounds can happen even with the best of care. The same goes with some forms of cancer. Sometimes it's just really difficult to keep the skin healthy when cancer is destroying the body. Now, those circumstances really need to be addressed by expert witnesses to give you all the background on that. Now, let's go back to those 3 questions that I go through with my prospective clients. And we're now down to question 2. Did the bedsore cause serious harm? Now, to bring a civil case, you need damages, real harm, and bedsores can absolutely qualify. Serious harm includes things like pain that never should have happened, infection, hospitalization, sepsis, surgery, and in the worst cases, death. Obviously, the worse the bedsore, the worse the outcome is likely to be, which in many cases will increase the damages to the resident. So we have to nail down what are the damages. Question 3, what did the facility do or not do? This is where cases can turn from troubling to infuriating. Sometimes families aren't notified promptly that their loved one even has a bedsore. Sometimes a bedsore is downplayed. Oh, it's just a little red spot, or oh, it's just a little purple spot, when in fact, it's much, much worse. Sometimes family members discover a bedsore while they're visiting, and they're shocked because they were never told about it. I've heard that story dozens and dozens of times. And I've seen cases where a family member takes a photo of a serious bedsore on a Monday, but the nursing home notes from that same day will say something like, quote, skin intact, no issues noted, end quote. Now that's not a documentation error, that's a cover-up. And look, if you suspect a cover-up, trust that instinct, because your instinct's probably right. Okay, so enough about the legal side for a minute. Whether or not you're thinking about a lawsuit right now, here's what I want to recommend for every family to do when they see their loved one has a bedsore. Step 1, first and foremost, get medical attention and insist on a plan of care. If the bedsore looks open, infected, or if it's worsening, push for immediate medical evaluation. That can include a doctor visit or even a hospital evaluation depending upon the severity. Your loved one's health always comes first, always. Step 2, document what you see. Take clear photographs, preferably with date stamps if possible. Take photographs from multiple angles so that the size and the depth are clear. Take close-up pictures and wider angle pictures. And I always recommend holding like a quarter next to a wound so it's easy to judge the size of the wound. Sometimes if the picture is just of a wound, it's hard to verify just how big that is. And then also document the day and time you noticed it. Write down what the staff said, who said it, and if they give you explanations, write down those too. Even if they're like, well, I don't know how that started, write it down. Document everything and take pictures and videos because look, memories fade, but your photos, the videos, and the written notes, those don't. Step 3, ask for a care plan and wound documentation. Here you're looking for specifics. How often is the resident supposed to be repositioned? What support surfaces are being used? How often is skin assessed? When was the bedsore first noticed by the facility? What treatment was started and when was it started? How often was the resident supposed to be repositioned? And how often was the resident actually repositioned? And where's the documentation to prove the repositioning? If their answers are vague, that tells you something. If they can't produce the documentation, that tells you even more. Step 4, escalate outside the facility when needed. If there's an immediate danger to your loved one, just call 911. Don't wait for their permission. Call 911. If there's no immediate danger, but you suspect neglect or abuse, I strongly recommend that you contact state agencies. In Missouri, you can contact the Missouri Elder Abuse Hotline at 800-392-0210. In Illinois, the Illinois Department of Public Health can be reached at 800-252-4343. Don't wait. Don't hope it gets better. Escalate it. Now let's talk about what a lawsuit actually looks like. Step 1 is the investigation. If you call my office, that's the first thing that we are going to do is investigate whether or not you have a legal case. And this is a must. And so to begin, we obtain the resident's medical records, things like care plans, wound care notes, MDS assessments, repositioning records, if there are any, nurse's notes, and nutrition records. We look for duties that the facility imposed upon themselves, like a care plan that says reposition the resident every 2 hours. Then we look to see what actually happened. What's the reality? Did they actually do what they said they were going to do? And do they have the documentation to prove it? And we look for gaps, and we look for contradictions, and we look for patterns. We also look at the federal and state standards that apply to nursing homes, including the requirement to prevent pressure ulcers unless unavoidable, and the requirement for sufficient nursing staff to meet residents' needs. And we look at the Missouri specific regulation requiring repositioning every 2 hours. In all these cases, we are required to have medical experts review the medical records and provide a medical opinion on whether they believe that there was negligence that caused the bad result. And we want medical experts who can explain to a jury how a bedsore develops, what proper prevention and wound care should have looked like, and what kind of pain a bedsore might cause a nursing home resident. We want them to be able to tell what should have happened and what really happened and what's the result of that. Step 2 is filing the case and watching the clock. Missouri and Illinois, like every state, they have time limits that apply to when you can file a nursing home case. In Missouri, an injury case, a case just involving an injury, must be filed within 2 years of the date of that injury, while a wrongful death case must be on file within 3 years of the date of the resident's death. In Illinois, it's similar but a little different. An injury case, like Missouri, must be filed within 2 years of the date of the injury, while a wrongful death case in Illinois must be filed within 2 years of the date of the resident's death. Now, I always tell people that 2 or 3 years, that seems like a long time, but you do not want to wait to file your case. Waiting never makes your case grow stronger. It just makes the evidence harder to get, and it makes the timeline harder to prove. People move on, employees are hard to find, evidence at the nursing home might disappear, and if you think you have a legal case, I recommend that you act right away. Don't wait. Step 3 is resolution. Do we go to trial or do we settle? So if we file a legal case on your behalf, we're prepared to take depositions and to go to trial. While most cases reach a settlement between the parties, some of those cases don't. If a facility denies responsibility, we prepare for trial, and we prepare to tell the story of that resident. And in doing so, we use photographs and videos. What were the duties that the nursing home had toward that resident, and what documents can we use to show that they failed in their duty? And that we use charting gaps and things like a turning and repositioning schedule that doesn't exist, even though it should, where they can't prove that they actually did reposition the resident every 2 hours. Those are the things that we use to show a jury exactly what happened in the facility at that time to that particular resident. So look, legal cases, trials, that's a long way off. Let's talk now about how to reduce the risk starting today. Let's talk about how you can avoid legal cases and trials altogether. If your loved one is in a nursing home right now and you want to be proactive, here's some tips that I believe will help you. First of all, visit often and vary the times that you're there. Don't be predictable. If the nursing home employees know that you're going to show up and visit dad every Monday and Thursday after work, I'm telling you, they'll clean him up before you visit, and you won't see the reality of his existence. So be unpredictable in your visiting schedule. I want you to see what care looks like when families aren't expected to be there. So pop in at varying times. And then ask directly, how often is your loved one being repositioned? Ask to see the care plan and ask what has changed recently, if anything. Look at your loved one's heels, their tailbone, their hips, and their shoulders. And if you see redness that doesn't fade when you press in on it, treat it like it's an urgent warning and point that at the staff and follow up on it in the future. Document your concerns in writing so that there's a record. Send an email to the administrator, follow up in writing after conversations, things like that. And look, remember, you want to be polite. You don't want to be a jerk. You don't want to be threatening. You just want to be persistent. Don't be difficult. You're being proactive and you're being protective of your loved one. And that's what's most important. So if you're worried about a bedsore or you think the facility isn't being straight with you, talk with a lawyer who handles nursing home cases. These cases are often not very straightforward and they require specific knowledge that not all personal injuries have. You're welcome to call my office, but at least call someone who knows about this type of case. If you call me, I'll tell you what I would look for, what records matter, and whether this looks like negligence to me. And I'll be honest with you. If I don't think you have a case, I'll tell you that too. What I don't want you to do is wait. Don't sit back and hope that it gets better on its own, because bed sores don't get better when the same problems that cause them are still happening. Okay, we've talked a lot about bed sores, and granted, none of it's very comforting. But let me reiterate one thing here before we close. Not every nursing home has these problems. Yes, it's true, bad things can happen at any nursing home at any time, but that doesn't mean that every nursing home is routinely doing bad things. And that's why it's really important that you pay attention to the nursing home you pick for your loved one. And I'm going to help you do that. The next video you should watch is called How to Choose a Safe Nursing Home, What the Industry Doesn't Tell You. In that video, I will give you some hints on what I've learned in 25 years of handling nursing home cases and what I learned in the process of placing my own father in a nursing home. I hope that information will be helpful for you if you're at the starting gates on having to have a loved one go into a nursing home. And if that's where you are right now, go watch that next video and I'll see you there.